Let's be honest, just the word cannibalism makes your stomach twist. We imagine monsters, horror movies, or serial killers. But here's the uncomfortable truth: humans have eaten other humans throughout history. Not just once, not just in extreme cases, but across cultures, continents, and centuries. Sometimes as a ritual, sometimes out of desperation, sometimes because they wanted to. So today, we're going to take a trip into one of the darkest corners of human history, where survival, belief, and brutality all meet at the dinner table. And here's the big question I want you to think about as we go along. If you were starving, truly starving, could you do it? Let's find out. Okay, let's start with the ancient world. Because believe it or not, cannibalism wasn't always seen as evil. In some cultures, it was sacred. Take the Aztecs. Human sacrifice is already terrifying enough, right? But some sources describe how after rituals, the bodies of the sacrificed weren't just discarded, they were sometimes eaten, not as dinner, but as a way of consuming the life force of the victim. Imagine believing that by eating a piece of flesh, you were taking in the power of the gods, and they weren't alone. In places like Papua New Guinea, certain tribes practiced what's called endocannibalism, eating the flesh of their own dead relatives. But here's the twist: it wasn't cruelty, it was love. They believed eating their loved one's flesh kept their spirit alive within the family. Think about that. What we see as horrifying, they saw as respect. Then there were warrior cultures. In Fiji, nicknamed the Cannibal Isles, chiefs would eat parts of defeated enemies. Why? To humiliate them, to prove dominance, or even to steal their strength. Imagine being a warrior, watching your enemy's body carved up, knowing you might be next. So here's the question: were these people monsters, or just following a logic their culture taught them? In their world, cannibalism wasn't madness, it was meaning. Now let's get to the cases that really make us uncomfortable. The ones where it wasn't about ritual, but survival. Picture this: you're trapped in the snowy Sierra Nevada mountains in 1846. Your wagon train is stranded, food is gone, and winter has closed in. That was the fate of the Donner Party. Families froze, starved, and finally, when corpses began piling up, some resorted to eating the dead. Parents eating neighbors, children eating strangers. Not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. And this isn't unique. In World War II, during the siege of Leningrad, starvation lasted for almost 900 days. People boiled wallpaper paste for calories, ate pets, even grass, but there are documented cases of cannibalism in the city. Neighbors whispering about who had vanished. Authorities even had to form special police units to investigate cannibal crimes. Or think about shipwreck survivors. One of the most famous was the whaling ship Essex, rammed by a whale in 1820, the story that inspired Moby Dick. Stranded at sea, sailors drew lots, and the unlucky man who lost became food for the rest. Imagine sitting in a tiny lifeboat, starving, staring at your crewmates, wondering if you're next. So, I'll ask you again: if you were truly starving, would you do it? Because history shows, when pushed far enough, humans almost always do. Here's something most people don't know: sometimes cannibalism wasn't real at all. When Europeans began exploring the Americas and the Pacific, they loved to describe cannibal tribes. In fact, the word cannibal comes from Carib, the name of an indigenous people Columbus encountered. Were they actually cannibals? Maybe, but European writers exaggerated it heavily. Why? Because if you could paint a people as savage flesh eaters, it suddenly seemed acceptable to conquer, enslave, or even wipe them out. In other words, cannibalism wasn't just an act, it became a weapon of colonial propaganda. You might think cannibalism ended with history's darker ages. Not true. In 1972, a plane carrying a Uruguayan rugby team crashed in the Andes. With no food, no rescue, and freezing temperatures, survivors turned to the bodies of their dead teammates. They described how horrifying that first bite was, but also how, once the barrier was broken, it became simply survival. Many of them are still alive today and openly talk about it. Then, of course, there are the nightmare cases, serial killers like Albert Fish or Jeffrey Dahmer, people who didn't just kill, but consumed their victims. These aren't about survival or ritual. They're about something darker: obsession, control, perversion. That's where cannibalism becomes a symbol of pure human horror. So, what do we do with all this? Cannibalism is one of humanity's last great taboos. We're disgusted by it, and yet, history proves it has always been with us, sometimes sacred, sometimes survival, sometimes evil.
It forces us to face a question we'd rather avoid. Is cannibalism the ultimate act of monstrosity, or just another part of being human in extreme situations? Maybe that's why stories of cannibalism stick with us. They're not about them. They're about us, about what any of us might do if the world got dark enough. So, what do you think? If you were trapped, starving, and death was only days away, would you cross that line?